we're going to move on to the next speaker. His name is Brian Kang. He is a Korean American immigrant whose journey involves his struggle to find belonging, battles with depression and self-worth, and finding ways to connect with God through it all. He works in the space of AI and machine learning at Google. He runs a management consulting firm and loves to fish, of all things. He shares his life with his wife, Linda, their two daughters, Sophie and Penny, and their two rabbits, Fuzzy and Tiger. Now, Brian hails from Boston, and he's actually moving homes this weekend. And so we wanted to make sure that we wouldn't run into any technical difficulties with him speaking. So he will join us for live Q&A after his talk, but here's a video of him giving his presentation on finding our voice.
Thank you, Denise. I wanted to start my talk with a couple of questions for you guys and gals. Have you ever felt like it wasn't okay to be yourself? And in that same vein, did you ever feel like it was all up to you to fix the way people thought of you or change the circumstances that were happening around you? That's been a big part of my story. I want to share that, and I hope some of it resonates with you so you can take something away that helps you in your life. So my story started in South Korea, where I was born. I lived there till about the age of 5, and the economic situation wasn't great. And so I think my parents were looking for a way to give us a better opportunity. And so they found a way to bring us to the States. We moved to a small city in the state of Washington called Lakewood, Washington, where my uncle and his family was living. And my parents tell me the story about how at the time, I think for around 3 to 6 months, actually, I refused to learn English. And I think it was just my way as a 5-year-old to try to maintain some form of control over a situation that was very out of control. And from there, as I grew up and had this relationship with my mom and my dad, a couple of things formed in me. So with my dad, the two emotions that I remember experiencing were anger and apathy. And because of that, I spent a lot of energy and time trying to keep him from getting upset, and also trying to figure out how I can get him to recognize or acknowledge or appreciate me. And so there was a lot of effort there. And the idea that formed in me was that it was all up to me to make things change for me and for the things around me. And with my mom, though she really, really cared and did a lot to take care of us and really gave us everything we needed, one of the things that was really challenging was whenever we had strong emotions, so sadness, anger, frustration at things that people did outside of us, it was always quickly stamped down. Don't feel sad. Don't be angry. Don't be upset. You know, just that was like the default. And when people outside of us would do things to us, it was always like, think about them and think about their circumstances of what they're going through. And though it's not a bad thing, I think what that left me was this impression that it wasn't okay to be fully myself. It wasn't okay to be my emotional self in this situation. And those two things really stuck with me. Now, in parallel, I grew up in that city of Lakewood, in this place that was nestled in between an Air Force base and an Army base. And because of that, there was all these different people kind of coming in and out of this city. And it was beautiful. I got to meet so many people from different cultures, in different countries, different languages, different foods. It was just beautiful. And it's something that I grew up longing for as I got older in my life. What I did notice, though, was when I was with my friends of color, we were treated differently by authorities, by the community, by teachers. It was really odd, and I didn't know how to process it. And on top of that, I was made fun of for looking the way I did, eating certain types of foods, or talking a certain way. And it really added to that impression of, hey, it wasn't okay to just be fully myself. Like there was something wrong with me or something with me that just wasn't acceptable. Fortunately for me, I had a great friend, and his name is Tony. He's on the top left with his arms kind of on his side. And his family really took me in, almost like a family. And like His dad is in the bottom left. His name's Mr. Duncan, and he took us to all of our games, gave us snacks, rooted for us, took us to all our practices, argued with the other parents who were trying to give us crap. And it was something that I didn't realize how important it was until later in my life. He was like a second father to me, and he treated me just like he did his sons. And I'm extremely grateful for that experience. And it taught me a lot and countered some of the messages that were going on inside me. Then from there, I went into college and met a bunch of great friends who I still talk to this day, and they really accepted me as I was. And that was another kind of a data point for me to think about as I was reviewing the messages I got from my parents growing up. And then I met my wife, Linda, and she was different from, all the people that I had grown up with. She was direct. She was honest. She said what she meant, didn't have hidden agendas. And so there's this concept of nunchi in the Korean culture, which is basically you don't have to say what you want to say, but people can still know what you mean or kind of get a sense for what you mean. And though that's kind of almost like intuition, the problem with that in my family was that a lot of the things that we thought were true and we thought the other person was thinking ended up not being the case. And so there's a lot of miscommunication that we later found out in life that we had to work through. And Linda's been great in teaching me how to be more direct and honest, and also how to really, take things for the way they are rather than trying to read into everything. And so it's been a really great experience having her as a partner in my life. Moving forward into my career, up to this point on the slide, I've been working for about 15 years, made my way through the ranks, mostly in technology and consulting. And things went well overall in my career. I was leading teams. I was doing the things I wanted. And then this situation came up where I was working with a boss that I just couldn't make happy. And no matter what I did, no matter all the things I tried, it just wasn't enough. And I just hit the wall. I hit a wall. And it felt like everything that I valued or felt was feeding to my self-worth was no longer valuable. And I didn't know what else to do. And I fell into this deep depression. And I felt like I wouldn't be able to continue on my career. And there was just a lot of uncertainty there. And so in that time of depression, I would sleep for long periods of time and have a really hard time waking up, even for the basics of eating and taking care of myself, showering and things like that. And it was really hard. I remember one moment in bed where I was just, a phrase came upon me, and I Googled it, and Graham Cook came up. I had no idea who he was. He's a pastor that speaks online, and listened to one of his messages. And the thing that came out from that message was that God sees me for who I am, and he sees me, regardless of what I do or what I've done or what I will do, he sees me the same. He never changes. And that really started to settle in my heart. And along with that, I started to build out a support system of therapists and friends and people that I could really rely on. And I still use that today. And in terms of what's on this slide, I did a post about my journey into depression. And if you're interested, please look at that. And the other phrase that really came out of this time was the feeling that regardless of what I felt about my self-worth or my future was, that God had a plan for me, and that those plans were good, and that he wasn't trying to harm me, and he had a future and hope for me. And that really stuck and made me start to feel hopeful again. And then the time of COVID came for us this year. And in that time, it's been really hard being this isolated and feeling super alone at times. And seeing some of my friends of color going through even more challenging times based on COVID, the pandemic hitting them harder. And that's been really hard. And on the other side of that, I think what it has given me an opportunity to do is really reflect on both my past and what I've really enjoyed in life and what I want to look to do in the future. And it's definitely going to be something around social good and social justice. And so I'm really thankful for that time of reflection. And then soon after that, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, the news of those events came out, and that hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was almost like physical scales came off of my eyes, and I was no longer able to be blinded or keep myself blinded from the reality of what's happening in this country. And I remember when the news of Ahmaud Arbery hit, I wept all weekend. And I think part of it was I put myself in Ahmaud Arbery's mom's shoes and tried to imagine what it would be like to go through what she did, to wait for her son's murderers to basically not be charged for months and months while you pleaded for them to be charged. And then I thought back to my friends from school and Mr. Duncan and the kind of experiences they must have had growing up. And all of that together really hit me hard. And so all weekend I wept and I tried to figure out what to do with that. And coming out of that, I poured myself into social justice work and figuring out how to make change and drove myself into the ground. And what I realized from that is that I really need to figure out what I need to do to fuel myself to be able to continue. And for me, it's nature, as you can see in this picture, and fishing. You know, my dad and I, after the pandemic hit, we picked up fishing again, and we started going out and failed really bad at first, but have gotten really good, and it just gives me fuel. And then secondly, again, going back to kind of that theme, when I feel like it's all up to me to change things, things don't go well. I drove myself to the ground, and I do that continually. It's like God continually has to teach me this message. And when I learn to accept that, hey, you do your part, God does the rest, things go much better. And one of the phrases that really comes to mind to me is on the screen. It says, there's nothing you can do to make him love you more. There's also nothing you can do that would make him love you less. And that really hits me deep. And it also hits on that thing of me trying really hard to get my dad to recognize and notice me. And just thinking that, hey, maybe I don't have to do that. Maybe I'm okay as I am, and God sees me for that, and he just loves me the same no matter what. So a lot of these people here are my friends, my family, people that I get to enjoy my life with, and I'm super thankful for them. And I'm so glad to be able to experience all the different things that they experience in their life together with them, and really appreciate that they have also seen me for who I am and appreciate me for that. And that has continued to grow that thing in me that says, hey, maybe it's okay to be myself. Along with that, I feel this strong sense of responsibility for all of them and everything that they go through. And again, I have to remember, hey, it's not all up to me. I do my part and God does the rest. And loving them sometimes means just doing all I can without trying to take it all on my own. So I'll leave you with one last story. So I told you about my dad, how, we had that relationship of anger and apathy. And then this year we kind of picked up fishing. Well, it's really strange. He's 75 years old. And for a long part of my adulthood, I tried to explain to my dad why the things that he did were really hurtful and how he hurt me and my mom. And it just wasn't sinking in. He just couldn't hear it. And this year, for whatever reason, similar to my scales, something fell off of his eyes and his heart. And he was able to hear. He was able to see the impacts of the things that he did, even though he didn't mean to, the impacts of the things that he did to me and my mom and my family. And he was able to listen and hear it and be empathetic, and also to see, like, what could he do to try to make things better. And I see that as an absolute miracle, something that hasn't happened in, how many ever years, finally happened when he's 75. And I'm really grateful. And I just want to say, like, hey, God can do miracles. Like, he can do anything. And I'm just really glad to be able to share that story with you, and to basically say that I hope that God continues to do those things in me. And also, I'd love to hear things that God's doing in your life, and hope that He does similar things in this time of COVID and all the things that are happening around that. And yeah, thank you so much for listening, and God bless you.
Brian, I can't tell you what a blessing it was to have you share so honestly, transparently, to be vulnerable, to talk about the hard stuff in your life. So thank you for taking that step of faith with us. I think it is encouragement for all of us.
Thank you, Dee.
Yeah, one question that came through, and you talked a little bit about this, but I'm hoping you can unpack it a little bit more for us. And that is kind of the process. Joanna asked this question: what is the process of transformation from the culture that you grew up in to now speaking the truth in love? Can you just talk more about that transformation?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's such the hard question, actually. I think the process was a really long one for me. I'm a type of person that in the past didn't really think about what was going on inside. Typical to most Asian men in this case. We don't really get in touch with our feelings. Our parents don't really teach us that. It's a really hard thing to learn. And I think just like over the past maybe 10 years or so, I started to meet friends and started to meet other people who are more introspective and more thoughtful about what's going on inside their inner world. And that helped me. Therapists helped me with that. And I guess like if there is a process, it's kind of learning to tap into your inner world, learn to know like what are the things that cause you to think X, Y, and Z? What are the things that make you feel challenged or make you feel about yourself in a certain way, and that process is probably the hardest one that I had to kind of overcome over the years, but it's been very fruitful.
Great, thank you. Another question that I personally had, as an Asian American, something that I thought a lot about in recent months is the stereotype of Asians being this model minority, and how, while that is usually meant to be kind of a compliment, for some reason it rubs me the wrong way, and I'm wondering if you have an opinion about this model minority concept.
Oh yeah, it absolutely rubs me the wrong way as well. And I will say I'm also not the typical Asian male as much as I used to be. So when I was a kid, I think partially because I was depressed, I was very quiet and reserved, and like took time to think through things, didn't really respond, kind of like took everything in and was like amicable with everyone. But today, like I'm not depressed anymore. I'm just kind of my authentic self. I'm honest, I'm direct, I'm like, I say what I think, and sometimes people don't like that. And that's the thing that, I find the more I am like my true self is when I can get into the place where people see me as like the non-model minority, because I'm like different than most whatever Asians the people would think. And so I think that whole concept is very demeaning in the sense that it looks at you as a person of a specific like nationality or the way you look, and says like, this is where you fit, this is the type of person you are. And I think everyone should be seen as an individual.
Thank you for sharing that. That's helpful for me. And I think just your call to be your authentic self is a universal truth that I hope we will all embrace going forward. Thank you so much for your talk and joining us on your moving weekend. Really appreciate it, Brian. You've been a blessing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.